Hello, my name is Olurotimi Osha. Today is July the 8th, 2026, and today is the anniversary of the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence by Colonel John Nixon in Philadelphia in what came to be known as Independence Square. So happy anniversary, but that's not what I want to talk about today. I'm not talking about the Declaration of Independence today. Today, I'm going to be continuing my expatiation of the birthright citizenship decision in Trump versus Barbara. I did an earlier video, trying to predict that at some point in time, birthright citizenship in America will come to an end. By the way, I have no preference either way. I'm an American citizen, and the thing is, maybe I should keep my politics private, but if anybody notices, my discussions, I'm analytical and I try to be balanced in my videos. The purpose of me doing these videos is to provide information and just help in education, right? Help in educating the public, whoever pays attention, um, and to help the process of analysis, right? To help in the process of using information, getting educated, and being analytical. Um, so, the better uh, analyst is one who's able to separate their own personal feelings, right, rather than uh, skew the analysis with their emotions, right, by emoting, uh, or by infusing the analysis with their own personal preference, right, or bias. So in any event, I am a progressive, but I try not to let my progressive uh, ideals taint my analysis. So today, what I want to do is not so much a rebuttal, but I want to provide definitions to clarify uh, and address a rebuttal to a video I made concerning, Justice Kavanaugh's analysis concerning the birthright citizenship case. So someone who turned out to be a lawyer, right? The person's actually an attorney. Uh, Made certain points that tended to distort, and for instance, they raised the issue of precedent, right? Saying, well, that uh, Congress creating a law defining subject to the jurisdiction thereof uh, would uh, be affected by precedent, or they try to insinuate that because of the doctrine of precedent, which courts follow, that it precludes Congress from fulfilling their constitutional function of making laws. That couldn't be further from the truth. And in the earlier video I made, I also I gave the example of England, uh, which has ended birthright citizenship, right? Unconditional jus soli. Um, that's right of soil citizenship, which they did in January the 1st, 1983. And in this person's rebuttal to my video, the person was pointing out that, by the way, England has um, an unconstitutional, sorry, not unconstitutional, but an unwritten constitution, right? England has an unwritten constitution, and I don't know how that addressed the discussion. So that's typically called a non sequitur, right? Not intending to be rude, but again, just to help in analysis, right? In how we think, right? In how we think and how we analyze properly. So that's, the way the person was citing how England has an unwritten constitution to the, in response to the video and my saying, well, England ended birthright citizenship January the 1st, 1983. The person's rebuttal saying, well, England has an unwritten constitution. That's what's called a non sequitur, right? It was irrelevant. It doesn't address, the discussion that we were having. So in any event, my friends have who watched this video who were kind, and my mom, they've said to not to pack as I unpack information and do my analysis and provide historical information and guidance, that I shouldn't put too many complex concepts, right, or principles in one video and to break them up. So in this one, I'm going to be defining precedent. So the person raised precedent, as if precedent precludes Congress from making a law that, as the very famous Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz pointed out, and which Justice Brett Kavanaugh was signaling in Trump versus Barbara, which upheld, birthright citizenship, by the way. But was signaling, but he was also signaling that Congress can make a law, right, that defines who, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, refers to. Now I'm going to define precedent, but by the way, in 1982, Congress did explain. They did point out who was not subject to the jurisdiction thereof in the 14th Amendment. Right, that's 8 CFR 1101.3. So CFR means Code of Federal Regulations. So that's one of the those are so some of the statutes, right, that Congress creates. So as I was working as an auditor in the Department of the Navy, I had to be studying those things, right? I had to look into those CFRs and USCs, United States Code. There's CFR, and there's DFARS. Okay, DFARS is created by, I think, the Department of Defense, right? There's FAR, I think, those deal with acquisitions. So we have all these statutes, and Congress makes these statutes. So in 8 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Code of Federal Regulations 1101.3, Congress expressly states that the children of the foreign diplomats, right, are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So it's right there. But now back to what I want to discuss today, precedent. I want to define precedent, right? In Latin, it's called stare decisis, right? So you learn, it's one of the first things you learn in constitutional law, in law school, stare decisis. By the way, with respect to the pronunciation, another quick sidebar, and I'm going to get on with this. So I studied international human rights law at Oxford University, right, in the United Kingdom. And while there, I guess the equivalent of what we call graduate assistants or research assistants. So a student there who was leading, who was helping us, because we went to the Crown Courts at Oxford, and so we had a mini lecture, and he helped, and he was teaching us about explaining stare decisis, and he made that point of correcting an American student who was there. So it, just as in America, if you're not American born, if you come from Africa or somewhere else, you will notice Americans like to correct how you pronounce things, right? American English. Americans do that. Now, when Americans go to England, well, the British English people correct Americans on pronunciation. So this person who was a student, an Oxford student who was English, was correcting an American's pronunciation of stare decisis. He goes and look, it's not stare decisis, it's called stare dikikis, right? It's pronounced stare dikiki, and it's the only time I've ever heard it called that way. But hey, that's what an English man said it was. It's Latin, by the way. So he said it was stare dikiki. I don't know if he had an S, if he pronounced an S, but behind it, dikikis. I think he said dikiki. I'll never forget that. And but it's the only time I've heard it called that way. So in America, we call it stare decisis, and it just means to stand by to stand by prior decisions, right? To stand by prior decisions. So that's the doctrine of precedent, and of course it's from English common law. So it's it's basically directing the courts, right? It's directing the courts to adhere to established judicial decisions, right? In deciding similar cases, right? So when you go to the courts, and that has to do with the legal system, right? That it directs the courts to stand, right, to adhere to established judicial decisions in similar cases. And the reason is that it ensures consistency, right, predictability, and fairness, right, in our legal systems, right? So those things are very important. But this has to do with the courts, the legal system. Now, we inherited, and we still practice common law, English common law. We inherited it from the English common law, right? So that is what we practice in America, English common law. Nobody will understand what English common law means. It's not that it's common for commoners, right? For common people, that's not what it means. But you would understand this until you go to law school. You're a law student. So I didn't understand it myself until because until I went to law school. I graduated from law school. That's how I came to really understand what English common law means. I'm practicing common law. So that's where laws are we follow the judicial decisions, right, and opinions of judges, right, in cases. The decisions, the written opinions and decisions, the outcomes of judges. So we also call it judge-made law. So that's what common law is. That's what common law is, as opposed to there's what's called civil law, in which the law is basically just a statute. But the fact is, we also have a combination. We have statutory law created by Congress. Now, the fact that courts use precedent, right? They follow stare decisis. They use precedent in making their judicial decisions, right? Because there are cases and controversies. People take cases to the courts, to judges, and it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. Their role, again, as Article 3, it's in our Constitution, is simply to define, to interpret what the Constitution says, what the law says. That's what they're supposed to do, right? They're not supposed to make law or create law. Article 1, the Article 1 organ of government, that's Congress. They're the ones who make laws. They create laws, right? And then Article 2, they enforce laws. Now, with respect to England not having an unwritten constitution, right, that's actually incorrect. Literally, it's incorrect literally. It's more of a metaphor. When you take high school government, high school legal, or in Nigeria, what we call it is government, a government course, a course in government. I did that in secondary school in King's College in Nigeria, government. Yes, we learned that England has an unwritten constitution. So that's just an easy appellation, right? But it's a misnomer. It's not, and it's a metaphor, right? Um, what England does have written constitutions. What it's referring to is that England has an uncodified, does not have one codified uh, book like we Americans have. Americans have one codified book we call the U.S. Constitution. We constantly still use the 1787 U.S. Constitution, and then we make amendments after that, which is our supreme law of the land. England literally doesn't have one codified, right, written constitution that way. So England has a variety. Instead, England does have a constitution, but their constitution is dispersed amongst thousands, right, thousands of written documents over its long history, right. England, officially came into existence in 927 BC. In 927 AD, right? England, the Kingdom of England, under the act created by the various Anglo-Saxon tribes. And of course, in 1066, we all know of William William the Conqueror of Normandy, right? That's when the French had the aristocrats, right? The aristocracy who ruled the Anglo-Saxons. They met there in 1066. Afterward, the famous Battle of Hastings. And of course, England, the king still exists, right? Although that's been modified. So England they have this long history of documentation. So they don't use just one constitution, one document, right? Called a constitution, a written constitution. But they have a variety of written documents that are a part of the English Constitution. For instance, the Magna Carta. We're always celebrating the Magna Carta. Recently, we celebrated, was it the 811th birthday of the Magna Carta on June 15, 2026, right? June 15, 2026, which King John sealed, right? King John, his nickname was the Landless, or Landless, or whatever. He had this funny nickname, the younger brother of Richard the Lionheart, and he succeeded his older brother when he was killed. His barons basically held him captive and made him put his seal on the Magna Carta. It was a written document. It still exists, right? That's part of the English Constitution. In fact, that was the foundation of one of the foundational documents of the English Constitution, which America refers to, right? In our laws, we use the principle of Magna Carta, which established that everyone is subject to the rule of law. Even kings, the king and the government are subject to the rule of law. They're not above the law. Everyone is subject to the law, right? And it also started to establish the principle of habeas corpus. I've done a video on that. So this video is getting long, and I'll stop it, and I can actually do a discussion. I think it's pertinent to do a discussion on the evolution of the English Constitution. And so it's inaccurate to say England has an unwritten constitution. England does have a constitution, but it is uncodified, right? So you could say England has an uncodified constitution, meaning it's not in one written document like we have in America, in which we say this is the U.S. Constitution and it's the supreme law of the land. England has a variety of written constitutions, and because of the history of constitutional law and lawmaking in England, England still incorporates, its written constitutions, but England still uses, and then its statutes, right? England has statutes, like laws created by Parliament, laws made by Parliament, like its human rights laws created by Parliament. I think that was in 1998, or laws created by Parliament in 1911. The other things we know of the Bill of Rights. Before America had the Bill of Rights, the British had a Bill of Rights which limited the power of the king, creating a constitutional monarchy, right? In 1689, called the Bill of Rights, they established a constitutional monarchy, and they basically took the power of lawmaking away from the king and passed it to Parliament. Before that, England already had what's called a statute, the Statute of Marlborough in 1267 in the 13th century, just after the Magna Carta, right, which is a written document as well. So 1267 was Statute of Marlborough, right? Statute of Marlborough basically took lawmaking, which was the sole preserve of the king, right? Lawmaking, the king prior to the Statute of Marlborough ruled by the decree. All laws in England came from the king, emanated from the king. The king created law. He ruled arbitrarily. But in 1267, the Statute of Marlborough established that the king would make laws, but with the assent, the consent, and the unanimous voice of Parliament. At that time, we still have Parliament today, but at that time, Parliament was restricted to the barons, right? The king's barons, who were trying to, just limit the power of the king, the authority of the king over them. The barons and magnates. So the magnates were called, were the bishops, the clergy. They were very powerful, right? In English history, in European history, right? If you watch an old movie, you've seen Anne Boleyn, right, or the Queen, these medieval Queen Elizabeth I movies, and you see the monarch, the king or the queen, when they're addressing the lords, the Parliament, they say, "My lords spiritual and my lords temporal," right? So the spiritual, the spiritual lords are referring to the bishops, the magnates. The bishops were the magnates, and they were part of Parliament then, and they were very powerful because they owned lands. The church was extremely rich, right? And the heads of the church, by the way, came from the nobility, right? Because England had law of primogeniture. The firstborn inherits basically everything. The rest of his siblings, they find their way. The way they could maintain their status and power was to go into the clergy. So they were they went to the top of the clergy. They were the bishops, the archbishops, and whatnot. And so they were the magnates, right? So the barons and magnates made up Parliament, right? And so they worked with the king and his council. They worked together and started to create laws. Now, of course, over time, up until the English, I've done videos talking about how the English once abolished their monarchy, right? When they committed regicide during the time of the Commonwealth, right? During the reign of Oliver Cromwell and what they call his cronies. They ruled, right? He was Lord Protector of England. But after that, they came back. That's the monarchy came back, and the son of Charles I, who was beheaded, came back. But over time again, there was what's called the Glorious Revolution, in which William III and his wife Mary II, the daughter of James II, who wanted to. So religion was a big thing in England and Europe then, right? So the British didn't want a Catholic king, and James II was showing sympathies that he was going to push England into Catholicism, right? And so they basically pushed him out and replaced him with his daughter and her Dutch husband, right? A Dutch Prince William, right? And they ruled jointly. The only time England has had two people ruling at the same time. They shared power as William and Mary, right? During the Glorious Revolution, and that was when England changed its constitution, right, and created the constitutional monarchy with the Bill of Rights of 1689, right? So that's part of the constitution of England, right? And then, of course, England still rules by. They also use conventions as part of their constitution. Conventions are basically they're unwritten, non-legal traditions, right? For instance, an example of a tradition is understanding that the practice that the prime minister, right, normally needs the support of the House of Commons, right? So you see, the prime minister, is taken from the 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 uh, the party that wins in the House of Commons, right? Right now, it's the Labour Party, right? That's leading, and so Keir Starmer has announced his resignation because in the House of Commons, they've lost confidence in him, so he's resigning. So that's a convention, right? That's part of the U.S. the British. Sorry, I keep saying the U.S. the British Constitution. By the way, part of also their constitution, Britain today they call the United Kingdom. That's the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. This was established in 1922. That's part of their constitution. For those who don't know, prior to that, in 1801, it was Great Britain and Ireland, but Ireland became independent, and so it's now called Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Prior to that, England, which was the Kingdom of England, which was an independent kingdom in 927 AD, right, created by the merging of various Anglo-Saxon tribes, went on consistently, but around, was it May the 1st, 1701? Sorry, May the 1st, 1707, thereabout, the independent Kingdom of England and the independent Kingdom of Scotland then combined. They merged into Great Britain, right? Great Britain. And so they were the ones, it was Great Britain, the king who created, the king that the colonists rebelled against, the founding fathers, the framers rebelled against, to whom they wrote the Declaration, addressed the Declaration of Independence, was the King of Great Britain from the merging of the formerly independent Kingdom of England and the independent Kingdom of Scotland, right? So it wasn't the United Kingdom then, it was Great Britain. So, and our founding fathers, they were trying to assert their rights as Englishmen or as Britishmen, right? Majority of them were Englishmen, some of them were Scots, but they had a common king, the King of Great Britain, George III. So again, it's inaccurate to say England has an unwritten constitution, right? It doesn't prioritize one codified document like the United States does, right? Because the United States is a fairly new country, right? So it had learned from the experiences of England. That's about 1,000 years old, right? England, it's merged into Great Britain and the United Kingdom, but you see its laws still go back 1,000 years old. Yes, the kings, the monarchy still exists, even though the powers have been limited. If you notice, when King Charles III succeeded his late mom, Queen Elizabeth II, the British swore allegiance to the king. Americans don't. When you become naturalized an American citizen or you're going to work for the U.S. government, you take your allegiance, your oath of allegiance to the Constitution, not to the President of the United States or an individual. So the British don't prioritize their constitutional law like Americans do, right? So that's just the difference. I hope this helps. English law is very interesting. It's part of American heritage, right? So again, the principles in which Thomas Jefferson alluded to, right? He so eloquently expressed in the Declaration of Independence that all men, created equal, endowed by their Creator, with life, liberty, and he said the pursuit of happiness. It was a concept from the English philosopher John Locke. John Locke, called it more like life, liberty, and property. And you see, that's what's codified in the 14th Amendment, right? In the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. In any event, this has gotten longer. than my friends would like me to go on for. So I'll stop this video here. My name is Olurotimi Osha, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.